Welcome to the eighth episode of Vinyl and Celluloid, the podcast, Quarantine Edition. Let me ask you one question. Have you ever met the members of your favorite band or group? Chances are you belong to the majority of music lovers that never had the opportunity. Well, today I will be talking with Juliana, aka Rock and Roll Padawan, a true rock and roll trooper that got to meet her rock idols, Aerosmith. An amazing story that can only be labeled with the Meatloaf track, Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through. So, Juliana, thank you so much for agreeing to be on this episode. I know it's been almost a year since we started talking about this episode, but finally we managed to get our schedules together and record it.
Yeah, it had to be a quarantine so we could do this. I'm sorry
Yes,
for
yes.
that, but thank you so much for having me in your podcast, Pedro.
Thank you, thank you. So, before we dive into your fantastic story, I'm sure about meeting Steven. I know he doesn't like to be called Steve Tyler. I just wanted to know a bit more about like what got you into vinyl, particular music genre you enjoy and own, and how long have you been collecting?
Okay, so most of my stories always relate to Aerosmith. It's like, yeah. Well, I always grew up with vinyl. My grandmother and her sisters, who were my great aunts, they had lots of vinyl, and but mostly from Ecuadorian music. I'm from Ecuador, so I don't know. I always liked to see the records and play them in the turntable, even though back then I was like 4 years old and I didn't know how it worked, and I basically damaged every single of their records. But let's say it began there. But then when I was around 11 years old, I became an Aerosmith hardcore fan, and I got my first CD, which was Just Push Play.
Yes, to
And
tell.
I don't know, yeah. So I don't know. I got fascinated about owning an album and not only hearing music but feeling it, having a CD in your hands, a booklet, and see the pictures and everything, the graphic art. And it began there, it, mainly with CDs. And then when I was around 18 years old, I began to collect vinyl. And my first vinyl was Aerosmith too. So yeah,
Mm,
that's how it all began
that's
around
great. Well,
12 years ago. Yeah.
but basically, so in your collection, beyond Aerosmith, which other artists like have a special place, or at least a large number of albums in your collection?
Well, Aerosmith, of course, is the main one, but I have lots of other artists in similar numbers, I would say. But mostly rock and roll,
Hmm.
hard rock, heavy metal. I love Black Sabbath. Maybe they have
Oh, cool.
the second place in my collection, and I actually have a couple of rarities from them.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, but I have lots of rock. That's mainly
hmm.
my target when I build my collection.
Great, great. Yeah, same here, same here. I have, I think, four Aerosmith albums. So they wouldn't rank quite up there, and despite enjoying them quite a lot, yeah, I only have four. Yeah, basically,
Which one?
Pump, Pump, Get a Grip, Permanent Vacation, and Rocks.
That's awesome. You have four great ones. I would say Pump and well, Rocks is my favorite one, and Pump for me they are the best ones. I would
Yeah.
advise you to get Toys in the Attic. It's another great album. Well,
Mm-hmm.
Aerosmith's first four albums are amazing and very underrated, but they are I think they are amazing albums. So that would be my advice for you to get any of them, but especially Toys. Such a
Toys
great
in the Attic.
album.
Okay.
Yeah.
Need to. to see if I can get my hand on that. So basically, even in terms of Aerosmith, we can just jump into it. What is your, you already suggested a preference, but what is your favorite album altogether from all of them? And I know it must be hard to choose one from such great albums, but if you had to pick one, would it be Just Push Play, Rocks, Toys in the Attic?
It's Rocks. Rocks is my favorite album. I think I like it because it's, well, Aerosmith has a very particular style. When you hear them, you know it's Aerosmith. But I think
Hmm.
that album has or shows a darker side of them. I mean, it's their style, but in a darker way and rougher
Hmm.
also. Um, I don't know.
Hmm.
That's what I like about the album. The sound, Steven's voice on it,
Yeah,
the lyrics. I don't know. I just love it. I think it's their best work
and
in
it was
10 years.
also a long time before the 1980s, the late 1980s, their highest charting album, right? Number three in the
Yeah.
U.S., I believe. So it's interesting to see how a band with that put forward their most obscure, if you will, lyrics and material, being very successful at it. But then again, in the 70s, I guess they had to make their own mark. I guess the next question is the one that we'll take. That's the one I've been looking forward to hear, which is, Steven Tyler. You've met Aerosmith. I'm sure you've seen him live more times than, or at least more times than I've attended concerts. I want to hear all about that story, and I'm sure all the listeners want to hear about that story.
Yeah, well, that's gonna be a long question to ask to answer. So I'm sorry,
Yeah.
prepare yourselves. But yeah, it's always one question I get asked a lot, and yeah, it's been quite a dream. Sometimes I can't even believe myself. Like if I would tell my story to the 11-year-old Julie, she will go crazy, and I don't know. But but yeah, it all began when I was around 5 years old. That was the first time I heard Aerosmith. I was seeing a Michael Jackson special on MTV because
Hmm.
Michael Jackson is also an artist. He's actually the reason why I became so passionate about music. So I was watching a special, and right after it finished, Walk This Way, the video was on. So I don't really remember what was the thing that caught me, but maybe Steven Tyler's moves. I don't know. So I knew the band way back then, since I was 5, and I liked their music, some of their songs, but I wasn't like a fan. Then
Hmm.
when I was um, around 10, I don't know, they released their song Jaded,
Yes.
and I don't know, it was just the song triggered something inside me when I first listened to it, and I will never forget the feeling. It was just like the perfect song. I don't know. So many things that came through my mind in that moment, and I was like, "Are they Aerosmith?" Because I wasn't sure. I was little. I was like 10 years old. In Ecuador, you don't get to hear, or especially back then, many rock music, especially in English. There was
Hmm.
only one radio station uh, which aired rock bands. So, and way back then, internet wasn't what it is today. So it was a little bit tougher to look for songs or
Hmm.
artists and stuff. So it took me a while to verify if it was Aerosmith. And yeah, it was them. And I became really interested in everything, and I began to research about them. I had a cousin who was very into rock, so he came one day and he put the entire discography in my computer, and that was pretty much it. I became uh, hopelessly devoted to this band, and whenever I saw anything that had to do with them, I was there. So many times I tried to see them during my teenager years. Of course, they never came here because, you know, Ecuador is such a small country and we're in the middle of South America. Most bands didn't tour us back then. I'm talking
Hmm.
about uh, the 2000 era. So,
Yeah,
um,
surely they would always you would see gigs in Brazil and
yeah,
Argentina, Guns N' Roses,
exactly.
Paul McCartney, etc., but never in Ecuador. I get it.
Exactly. So it was very hard to see them. I was thinking I would never see them because they were already not old, but they
Yeah.
were already around for a while. So I was like, maybe I will never see them. Then I tried to see them in USA for a couple of times, but I was never able to get my vacations on the same time they were on tour. And then
Hmm.
the one time I was able to, they canceled the tour because Steven fell off the stage. So I was like,
Oh yeah.
okay, that's it. That was way back in 2009, I think. And for my surprise, next year on 2010, they announced a South American tour, and Colombia was on their list. So Ecuador is right next to Colombia. So I was like, finally, this is my chance. I'm going to be able to see them. I got tickets. I was going to travel. By then, I was already working, so I was making my own money and I could do this. But unfortunately, a very dear aunt of mine, which was like a grandmother to me, passed away. So
Mhm.
I couldn't do the trip. Um, and I was sad about the whole thing. And I thought, well, maybe I will have to wait a little bit longer for another tour in USA. As I said, I was already working, so it would be easier for me to travel. But then, again, for my surprise, they announced another South American tour for next year. So that time, I was like, no, it has to happen here too, because they were touring almost the entire continent, but Ecuador wasn't on the list. So I was
Part of
like,
the
why? Why is this happening? Because they were going to very small other countries like Paraguay, um, and well, back then there was only one big promoter here in Ecuador who could bring them. So I went to talk with them and asked them if they were planning to bring Aerosmith, and they told me it wasn't in their plans. Their show was too expensive. There wasn't they weren't sure if they were able to fill a stadium. And I was like, you are so mistaken. There's so many people who wants to see Aerosmith because they have fans from every single age group, from people in their 40s and 50s to people in their 30s, 20s, even younger people. So they were very rude to me, and they were like, do whatever you want, but you would have to show us a proof that at least 30,000 people would come to the show.
yeah.
So I went back home and I was thinking, what can I do? So way back then, Facebook was just starting. Well, not just starting, but in Ecuador or in South America, it was new. It was 2011. It wasn't what it is today, not at all. And I was just thinking, what can I do? And I decided to create a Facebook page.
Okay.
So along with a friend who is also an Aerosmith fan, I met because of this entire initiative. His name
Hmm.
is Luis, and we decided to create this page named Aerosmith in Ecuador 2011. And along with this page, we created a Facebook event.
Hmm.
And what we did was explaining people there's a chance that Aerosmith could come here, but we have to prove the promoters how many people would be willing to attend this show. So the response was amazing. In the first week, we had already like 4,000 people who checked into the event and wanted Aerosmith, and they were sending comments like, "Yes, this is a fantastic idea. It has to happen." They were sharing our event and our page everywhere, and in a matter of 3 months, we had 36,000 people that were supporting our Facebook event. I'm gonna remember you that Facebook back then wasn't at all what it is right now. So this was like quite an accomplishment. It was crazy
Hmm.
to see the response. And what I did, printing the whole guest list we have from that event, and I brought it to the promoters, and I showed it to them. Here you have 36,000 people who want to see Aerosmith, and they were like, "Is this for real?" And I'm like, "Yeah, here's the list. Here is the event. You can check everything." They saw the comments of the people going crazy there, and they were like, "Okay, let me see what we can do." And a month later, they called me and they were like, "I hope you're happy because of you, Aerosmith is coming to Ecuador." So I was like, "Wow, I can't believe this."
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, it was so crazy, so amazing, and well, made lots of media found out about the story, and they were calling me and asking me questions about this. And well, later on, I found out this was the first time that someone used a Facebook event to demand something to happen. So we were the first people to ever do it. And
Nice.
yeah, and it became kind of a worldwide news. I had newspapers and TV channels from all over the world asking me questions about this thing, and it was crazy. So the concert happened, and it was, for me, it was a dream come true to see them. I didn't meet them in that time. I The promoters were kind of shitty, to be honest. They didn't even give me a ticket or anything. I had to pay for it, which didn't matter because in the end, that was what I wanted to see them.
Yeah.
So I saw them, and the feeling again, the same feeling I got when I listened to Jaded for the first time. I was like, no, this can't be it. I have to see them again. So next year, they announced a US tour, and I went to see them in Los Angeles. And there was when I met them for the first time, and it was amazing. They were all the nicest people, very humble, very I don't know, very nice, just like the nicest people ever. I met them all except Joe Perry. He's always the hardest one. And of course, the most special moment was meeting Steven because he has always been like my,
An icon, yeah. Your idol.
yeah, yeah, my idol and my lifetime crush. So it was amazing, and he was so sweet to me, so nice. So for me, that was pretty much it. I had my dream come true. I saw them in another country. I met them. Everything was fantastic. The next day, um, as a vinyl collector, I was in LA. Amoeba is there, which is this amazing, huge store that is one of the most popular stores in the entire world. So I went to Amoeba, and I got some Aerosmith stuff there. And when I was on my way back to my hotel, I ran into Steven Tyler on the street having a frozen yogurt with a friend. And I was like, when I saw him, I thought it was just my imagination. I was still in shock because of what
Yeah.
happened the night before. But no, it was actually him. And he's like, "Hey, I remember you." And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening." And we stayed there chatting for like 30 minutes. He was amazing. He signed some of my vinyl, and he was actually very interested. He's like, "You went to Amoeba, what did you get?" So I show him, and I got this Dude Looks Like a Lady picture disc, which is
Mm.
cut out like their logo. And he's like, "I've never seen this." And I was, "You can keep it if you want." let me make it better, and he autographed it. He's like very nice. He's really a very nice guy. And for in that occasion, I had made Steven a digital illustration of him that I planned to give it to him when I met him, but I didn't um, bring it to the hotel. And I told him about it, and he's like, "Yeah, we can meet again, so you can give it to me." And we met again for a third time, and I was able to give it to him. And well, for me, that experience was already more than I could have asked.
Yeah, of
But
course.
then, yeah, but then, well, I came back to Ecuador, and that was in August. Then in December, I was watching VH1, and I saw they were hosting a contest for Thanksgiving, and they had four bands as how can I say this? Four bands that were currently touring, and if you were a
Hmm.
fan of any of those bands, you could and say why are you grateful for them, and if you won, you won a trip to see them in the city you pick and meet them. So I was like, okay, let's give this a shot, but I thought I had no chance because it was a global contest, and I
Yeah.
won. Yeah, so I went
Why,
to
if
USA.
if you don't mind me asking, why? What was your answer, or is it too
Uh,
personal?
no, I was thankful because they were a very important part of my life, and they've been the soundtrack of my life. I sent my pictures with Steven Tyler and the other guys as well, and I was just explaining like what they mean in my life. It
Hmm.
was I don't even remember what I said, but basically that they are the love of my life. And I won, but BH1 was kind of shady. In the end, they took the meet and greet away. So I didn't get to go backstage. Um, I had to pay for my own trip, and all
Hmm.
I got was the tickets in the end. So in the end, it didn't matter. I went and see them again. Actually, I got to share this with one of my best friends, and it was amazing. And trust me, when that happened, I was like, okay, so many good things have happened to me. This is it. But here comes the best part. I promise I'm getting there.
No, fine.
Um, Next year, on May 2013, I got a message on Facebook from an enterprise named StarCount, and it was this girl who was asking me if I was the girl who did this initiative to bring Aerosmith to her country, blah blah blah. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And she's like, hey, I've heard about your story, and I've seen pictures of you with the guys, and know a little bit of your story, and I think it's fantastic. And she basically explained to me that they were an enterprise that kind of, how can I say this? What they did was monitoring celebrities and their fans' activity on social media.
Hmm.
So they were having some awards going on in Singapore, named the Social Star Awards, which were basically like the BMAs, but with not only with musicians, but with all kinds of celebrities, actors, actresses, soccer players, singers, every kind of celebrity. So Aerosmith was going to be part of this event, and they just wanted to have a conversation with an actual fan. And since this was all about social media, they found out about my story and thought it was a great social media story, and they wanted to interview me. That's what they claimed at first, that it
Hmm.
was just an interview, and they were also developing an iPhone app, and they wanted me to try it and give them some feedback. So
Mhm.
I agreed to this interview, and they asked me many, many questions, never ending interview, more like a questionnaire about why was I an Aerosmith fan and the impact they had in my life, um, lots of stuff, you know. And then,
Mhm.
of course, I also tried this app they developed and gave them my feedback, and I thought that was it. But then one day I was at work and I got this Twitter notification, and it said Aerosmith has mentioned you on Twitter, and I was like, what? And I checked the notification, and the tweet said, congratulations, Juliana, for being our biggest super fan. You're going on a trip with us to Singapore next week. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, is I was checking the account to check if it was like their official account, and it was. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, I remember I went to the bathroom and I locked myself into it, and I was just like shaking and I don't know. I was having a mental breakdown.
Sure. Yeah.
I, yeah, I was in complete shock, and I was like, "What's going on?" And then I get a call from London because this enterprise was in London, and it was this girl I've been talking to for the past 2 weeks, who put me in contact with reporters and all kinds of stuff. And she's like, "Are you still alive?" And I'm like, I don't know. I honestly don't know if I'm alive or I am dreaming or what's going on. And she's like, okay, let me explain you. We are Star Count. We are having these awards I told you about. We do monitor celebrities and their fans' activities. But actually, Aerosmith, um, the management of the band, found out about your story in Ecuador, and they wanted to meet this girl who was able to bring Aerosmith to her country with this kind of initiative, and they are very impressed, and they wanted to meet you and know who you are. And we were the people who were able to make it happen. We tracked you down, and now, because of what you did, you're coming with us to Singapore, and you're spending an entire week with them and come to the awards and everything. So I was like, this is crazy. Not even in my wildest dreams I would imagine something like that, like what happened to me.
Mhm.
So I went to Singapore. I was able to bring my best friend with me, and it was a surreal experience. Like, I got to be there with them in their same hotel. When I ran into Steven the first day, he even remembered me from LA because it only happened like 6 months before that. And he's like, "You are the fan. You are the one who make this whole thing in Ecuador, and you are the one who came here because of it." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Wow, I'm so happy," because usually it's hard to get a real fan out of this kind of circumstances and events like awards
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff. So he was like very excited that it was actually me, and he had met me before, and he could realize I'm a big fan. And he was amazing during those days. He would invite me to eat with him and his crew. And lots of amazing things happened that week. I got to walk a red carpet full of celebrities next to them. I walked the red carpet with Steven and the guys. Um, I was able to be in these awards with a room full of celebrities, spend an entire week with them, see them lots of times during that week. So it was like a dream come true, more than a dream come true. As I told you, I could have never imagined something like that happening. And basically, Steven, he was very sweet, and he told me that whenever I wanted to attend an Aerosmith show or anything that had to do with Aerosmith, to just give his assistant a call, and they will always take care of me. So he always kept his promise, and the next tour they had was that same year, again in South America. They didn't come to Ecuador, but they visited other countries like Argentina, Brazil, and I wanted to see them in two countries, Argentina and Uruguay. And I told him I wanted to go, and he had everything ready for me. I was his guest during that tour. I saw them in the two cities, went backstage with them, shared lots of amazing moments. And he's just like that. He's a very generous man. He's always very kind with his fans, not only me, but with everyone. When he has the time, he never rejects a picture, and he always tries to make a memorable moment for a fan, not
Mhm.
just like a simple picture or an autograph. He always does something to make it special. So he has been very amazing. I've seen them 23 times now, and
Whoa.
yeah, and I've been able to spend time with them, go backstage, share so many things. Even in Uruguay, we went to a casino together. I didn't have money. Steven lent me his money to bet, and that's how he is. He's amazing. He's very nice, very generous, very crazy, outgoing. You never feel like you are with a 70 year
You're
old.
off.
You feel like you are with one of your friends, a very
Yeah.
young one, always teasing you, making jokes, laughing. He's crazy. He's a crazy person, but in a great way.
In a
Um,
great way.
yeah, so that's basically my story. Well, something that I also get asked a lot is how I went to dance Walk This Way. And that happened in Peru 4 years ago. And I was backstage with Steven. I always bring them presents that have something to do with Ecuadorian culture. And Steven, he likes lots of ethnic stuff. So I
Hmm.
always try to bring them handmade things. And in that time, I brought him Panama hats. Many people
Yeah.
doesn't know Panama hats are actually Ecuadorian. They are just
Hmm.
named Panama hats, but we make them in Ecuador. And I had him made a custom one that had 24K gold on it. It was like an animal print design, but the
Uh-huh.
prints were made out of gold. So I gave him that hat, and he fell in love with it. He actually told me he was a big fan of Panama hats, and of course, I knew it. But he was in love with the hat, and he's like, "No, I have to give you something. I also have a gift for you." And he went to his drawer and he grabbed a harmonica, and then he stood there thinking, and he put the harmonica back in his drawer, and he's like, "I have a better idea. I'm not gonna give you the harmonica." And I was like, "What is this guy going to do?" And he tells me, "You do you know the choreography of Walk This Way?" And I'm like, "Yes." "Okay, then you're going to dance with me tonight." And I'm like, "Oh my god, this is happening," because he had told me many times before when I was backstage with him that he would bring me to dance with him, but he always said that, but it actually never happened. But this time, I don't know.
It
He,
actually took place.
yeah, he was like very determined, and he was asking me lots of questions about the choreography. And he called one of his assistants, and he told her to explain to me how the whole deal was gonna work. And I was in shock, and I was very nervous. I was shaking, and he took me to dance with him. It was the most amazing moment of my life, but it was also the most scary moment of my life because I was so nervous. Like I was shaking really bad. I couldn't even walk. I don't know how I stood in that stage. And I don't know, many things crossed my mind. Like, of course, I was living a dream because it all came like full circle.
Yeah.
The first time I saw them was with Walk This Way. So it had always been a dream of mine to dance Walk This Way with Steven. So it was happening. It was the moment I've been waiting my entire life for. But I also was thinking, what are these people going to think? Are they going to throw me bottles or stuff? It was so funny. And the moment was amazing. Um, Steven was dancing with me. Joe Perry came with his guitar, played next to us. The people were amazing. They were all screaming and taking pictures. It was amazing. It was the moment of my life, and that's pretty much the story. I told you it was
Cool.
going to be a long one, but
And it's a great one to hear. So obviously Steven Tyler has ranks first in the nicest of the Aerosmith gang, the Bad Boys from Boston. But who's the second nicest one? Is it Tom Hamilton, Joe Perry? Who was it?
no, they are all super nice. Like Steven, I've been able to share more with him because of the whole thing I've been telling you. But they are
Hmm.
all super sweet. Like Brad is the sweetest guy. He's always asking you questions. And I actually have a good relationship with Brad because I also know his sons,
Okay.
Harrison and Zach. Zach is the one who takes the pictures. He's their official photographer. He's super talented. And I don't know, with Brad, we always talk about them, and he knows we are friends. He's always one time I have another great story from Uruguay. There were lots of fans in the casino of the hotel. So Brad came down to talk with the fans. He was just like having beers with us, and we were chatting and laughing. And it was already 5 a.m. and Brad was still with us, uh, just laughing and chatting. And he didn't want to go because we were like, Brad, you have a show tomorrow. You need to rest. And he's like, who needs to rest? I'm gonna be here with you. I'm having the time of my life. So he's super. He's like that, you know. He's the one who comes and stays
Party's
with
hard.
the band. Yeah, and he doesn't care about anything else. Like he's amazing. Tom, he's the funny one. He's always cracking jokes and making you laugh. I remember the first time I met him, I made this fanzine about my story with Aerosmith, and he began. Well, he opened the fanzine and he was checking it out, and he began to ask a lot of questions about me and what do I think about Aerosmith, what's my favorite song. So you could tell he was interested in know his fans too, you know, and always very funny, making jokes, laughing. I think people consider him the nicest one, Tom,
Okay.
because he's very outgoing and sweet and funny. Also, Brad, then, well, Steven, he's crazy. He speaks
Yeah.
in his own language. He's always all over the place. He's a unique person. You know, he's one of he's special. You don't see a person like him anywhere. He's pretty unique.
Hmm.
Um, Joe, he looks like he's very serious and intimidating. You know, but
Hmm.
he
Uh-huh.
is very sweet. He's very nice. He just has a different vibe, you know. He looks serious, but he's not. When I talked to him for the first time, I was very nervous, but he actually he introduced me. His sons were there, so he introduced me to his sons, and then he made a couple of jokes. He gave me one of his guitar picks that first time, and in a second time, I told him I collected their picks. So he went to his dressing room and he came with a bunch of guitar picks and just gave them to me. So he's also a very nice guy. He's a little bit more quiet than the rest of
Hmm.
the guys. He's kind of shy. Even you wouldn't believe it. He's shy, but he's very nice. Like his appearance is not what he really is. He's very nice too. And Joey, he's the one um, that well, I haven't interacted with him so much as with the other guys, but he's
Hmm.
also nice. We have shared a couple of amazing moments too. Um, he's more serious, doesn't talk much, but they are all nice. Overall, they are very nice people, very down to earth, very humble, and always people think rock stars have this rock star attitude and they are like snobbish or you know
Well, we can thank David Lee Roth for that perspective,
yeah,
I would say.
yeah, probably, but no, they are like the proof. Not all of them are like that. They are very nice people.
Awesome. So I think the next question is, what's your take on? I mean, every band, every rock band has their ugly duckling. So basically, you have Van Halen with Diver Down, Kiss with Music from the Elder, and I guess in Aerosmith's case is actually Rockin' a Hard Place 1982, which is the most, I would say, divisive album among fans. What are your thoughts about the reputation and the merits of the album?
Well, I think it's an underrated album, to be honest. I like the album. I don't think it's their worst work. I don't have an album I hate because it happens. It's normal and it's not a bad thing to don't like something your favorite band has done.
Hmm.
But Rock in a Hard Place, in my opinion, is not a bad album. Of course, the circumstances weren't the best. The band
Yeah.
was falling apart. But it is a good album. The musicians involved are terribly talented musicians. Um, I don't know. I don't hate it. I like it a lot. I think it's underrated.
Hmm.
In my opinion, my least favorite album is their last album, Music from Another
Another
Dimension.
mention.
Dimension, yeah. Um, I don't think it's a bad album either, but it's not like I couldn't connect with with the album as a whole, like it happened to me with the other albums they released. Um, some songs I really don't like um, I Can't Stop Loving You. I
Mm.
don't even remember if that's the right name of the song, but it's a duet with Carrie Underwood. But I hate the song so bad that I never listened to it. I'm not even sure about the name. But it's normal, all of us fans have that
Yeah.
one particular album we are not big of a fan.
Hmm.
But um, also, what has happened to me with that album is that as time goes by, I learn to appreciate it more. Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
it's not my favorite. I love some tunes. It has fantastic songs too, like Street Jesus, which I consider it to be the best song of the album. It
Hmm.
has that Aerosmith vibe we all love and sound. Um, Love Three Times a Day. I mean, there's a couple of songs which are very very good, very Aerosmith. Um,
Driven. The vibe is there.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And I would love to see uh, a new album or at least a single. I
Yeah.
miss having new songs. Steven did his solo album, but it was country, which is not my favorite genre. But it
Yeah.
was a good album too. It was way better than I expected it to be. I would have loved it to be a blues album instead of country, but in the end,
Mm.
it was a good album. But I miss Aerosmith. I miss having a new song, something to be excited about, you know.
Yeah.
So I hope they would
I get
release
it.
some.
No, I completely get it. I mean, my experience, I saw them like once in 2014. during the promotion tour for Music from Another Dimension. And again, it wasn't one of those greatest hits set lists. So, but it was still a very good set list, mind you. Um, but yeah, I get what you're saying with the album. I went to the concert because it was Aerosmith, not because it was Aerosmith promoting that album. And I
Yeah.
was pleasantly surprised, especially after seeing so many legends. And sometimes you feel disappointed with the performance, but I mean, this was 6 years ago, but it was wow, impressive how Steven Tyler still manages to deliver. So I completely get what you're saying. The other bit I would love to hear your thoughts on. It's basically we have the fans that grew with Aerosmith in the 70s, America's answer to the Rolling Stones, if you will, and then you have the late 1980s MTV boom, starting with Permanent Vacation and starting into their golden age commercially. That was the 1990s with two number one albums and one number one single, the dreadful song "I Don't Want to Miss a Thing." But basically, like you see, or at least I tend to see some rivalry between both groups. Oh, you're not a real fan if you like their 1990s material and only know crazy and crying, and oh, but actually it's their most commercial and appealing material. So where do you stand on that? Do you see the same friction between the two groups?
Yeah, that always happens. There's always the fans that stick to the 70s and early 80s, and then the fans from the 90s. Um, and there's always discussions within the fandom about these different eras of Aerosmith. Um, the older fans, they wow, it's a hard question because I have many dear friends, many fans that have become dear friends, and some of them are like that. They stick to the 70s, and they have these attitudes, that
Hmm.
their 70s era it's the best, and the rest, well, it's not bad, but this is the real Aerosmith. And the other fans from the 90s era, they're like, but this was their real thing, before they were just discovering their sound, and this is their sound. And there's always that, what can I say, disagreement between
Hmm.
the two sides. I try to enjoy Aerosmith as a whole. They are
Hmm.
a band that have been together for 50 years, which is amazing because many bands, most of them can't say the same. They have their original lineup, which is amazing, that the entire members are still together. Uh, so I honestly enjoy every single era because I feel like every era has something new about them without them changing into something else, but more like, how can I say, um, adapting to the decade they were
Yes.
playing at. So I think every single era has something great. The 70s were rougher and, um, maybe more creative, if we talk in terms of music and the lyrics and the instruments they used, the way Steven used his voice during those albums. Um, and then in the 80s, their sound was more hard rock than blues,
Hmm.
because in the beginning it was like, it was, kind of bluesy and different,
Yes.
but uh, during the 80s, the sound turned more into hard rock, which was also great. And then in the 90s, even though it was more commercial, their sound was amazing, and many people got to know this band in other countries. I think that was a time when Aerosmith um, was finally heard in countries like Ecuador, for example.
Hmm.
So of course it's great. It's great that their music was able to find more places for it to be played and more fans to get to know their music. Um, my least favorite era is probably from 2000 and on, even though it might sound contradictory because I met them during those times. And
Yeah.
for me, Just Push Play is a very special record because that was the one who made me fall in love with them. But I prefer their sound from there to back. You know, music from
Hmm.
another dimension is not my favorite, as I said, but in the end, I enjoy every single era. Um, I do prefer the 70s sound just because it's a personal preference, but I don't think it's their best era. I think all their eras were good. Um, each one had its own magic, its own thing. So I don't stand anywhere. I love their entire history.
Hmm. Well, I was about to say that there'll always be critics that will dissect their 1990s output, but the truth is, I think that more than the music that they made, the fact that they're you mentioned some sort of reinvention or adapting. I don't
Mhm.
feel that they adapted that much, and in a good way because actually they stayed true to their roots,
Exactly.
and actually managed to thrive when the musical scene was changing. So you have two number one albums in an era that was dominated by bands that were the exact opposite of what Aerosmith was known for in the late 80s, right? And
Yeah.
you have examples of bands like Kiss who try to go for every single trend there is. Late 70s, they went disco. Early 80s, they went heavy
Mhm.
metal. Then they went glam metal. Then they even went grunge. So, I mean, yeah, fine. You have more room to criticize there, but I think
Mhm.
that's beauty and the importance of Aerosmith in the sense that they stayed true to themselves, and they explored commercially, but still they didn't drift away from their principles and their core. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's what I think. That's why I think it's sorry, I got a little bit lost. But that's the reason why I don't stick to a particular decade or era,
Yeah,
because they were always them. They always
yeah,
sounded like them. They never changed or drifted away from their original sound. For example, I always well, many people may disagree with me, many may agree, but we have local artists, not Ecuadorian, but one artist you all know, which is Shakira. Uh, she's Colombian, but she started as a rocker. She
yeah.
was rock and roll, and then I used to love her until her album Laundry Service, and then she completely um, transformed into something else. And I remember being so disappointed, and she keeps changing um, according to the music trends. And I would have hated it to happen to Aerosmith. And that's one thing that, as a fan, I treasure, that they never did that. They stuck with their sound, they
Yeah.
adapted, and they experimented without losing themselves. So I completely agree with what you said. I think
Mm.
that's amazing about them, and many music critics have not appreciated that, because I don't know. Sometimes critics are very how can I say this?
Biased. They're very
Yes,
biased.
yes, and they are always thinking about the selling part and the numbers, and things that are not necessarily what you should pay attention to when you talk about a band or their legacy, you know.
Yes.
So no, I think Aerosmith has proven that they have their sound, they know what they are, and they are not planning to let it
To
go.
change.
Yeah.
That's great. Here's to hoping that Steven and his buddies put out some new material very soon. Juliana, thank you so much once again. And well, let's rock and roll and keep in touch.
And no, thank you, Pedro, for having me in your podcast. I'm very excited to be here and being able to share my story because it's something that I always get asked, and it's hard to put in words, you know, like an Instagram post or something because it's a
Yes.
long story. It's something that took my entire life to get to. So it's been amazing to share it with you and everyone listening here. Um, and you know, I have my Instagram is all dedicated to rock and roll. I have this initiative called Rock and Roll Revolution, which is my hashtag, in which I just try to keep rock and roll alive. Um, that people can share their music. New bands can also use the hashtag to promote themselves, you know, just
Mm.
about keeping rock and roll alive. So it's a pleasure for me to be in this kind of spaces that allow rock and roll to keep itself alive.
Yep.
You
We're
know,
all we are
I don't agree with the statement that rock and roll has died. I believe it's very alive and well. So it's just a mission we all have. If we love rock and roll, we have to keep it alive. So that's pretty much what I try to do.
very true. Very true. Thank you.
No, thank you, Pedro. It was a pleasure and an honor to be here.